Hi, and thanks for joining me for another Maynard Talks. Today's topic is on cybersecurity. Let's get started. First, I'd like to pull together some quotes that I find interesting with regards to technology and cybersecurity. On the screen, I've pulled four that I think are interesting. I'd like to read just a couple. First, by Stephen Hawking. I think computer viruses should count as life. I think it says something about human nature that the only form of life we have created so far is purely destructive. We've created life in our own image. Also, I find it interesting that a person who preaches data privacy and security, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook, during a data breach in 2016, it was revealed that his password was DA, DA, DA. Not very secure for a man who preaches data privacy. And last, by John F. Kennedy, there are risks and costs to a program of action, but they are far less than the long-range cost of comfortable inaction. Before we get too deep in the technical weeds, I'd like to cover just a little bit about myself. My name is Ryan Carter, and I'm a senior infrastructure consultant with the Maynard Business and Technology Solutions Group. I joined Maynard in 2016. However, I've been in the IT field my entire career, which spans roughly over 25 years. I started in roughly 1990. I hold certificates in nonprofit leadership and management through Michigan State University. I'm ITIL Project Management Certified, Scrum Certified, and I hold a certification in Novell Administration. I've held executive director level positions in nonprofit, but I've also worked in the manufacturing space, medical malpractice insurance, state government, and IT consulting sectors. Before joining Maynard, I actually owned and operated my own IT consulting practice, which I formulated in 1998. Within Maynard, I focus in a couple of areas with regards to Dell, Cisco, VMware, and network vulnerability assessments, which we'll talk a little bit about in this presentation. On the left-hand side of my screen is my contact information. Please feel free to send all questions to my email address from today, rcarter@maynorsolutions.com. Feel free to reach out to me in my direct line, 517-886-9526. And I've also included my LinkedIn account information, where I post a great deal of information on cybersecurity, ways to stay safe, and things that we see in the industry that are impacting our clients today. So feel free to tag me on LinkedIn. I'll be glad to add you. Today I want to cover a couple of agenda topics. First and foremost, we need to define what cybersecurity means. When we talk about the word cybersecurity, we use it in the sentence due to protection, meaning that we're protecting our systems or infrastructure, but we also mean protecting our data. So we need to have a conversation around data. We need to define some of the threats that we see today. I want to touch on the magic IT silver bullet solution. We need to discuss some common attack surfaces that we ignore but we really shouldn't. And what can you do as an individual to make a difference with regards to cybersecurity? And last but not least, you'll be able to walk away from this presentation with the last slide that I have some helpful resources that you can use to stay safe in your daily life, pass on maybe to your coworkers, or even share with your family and friends. So before we get too far deep into the weeds, I'd like to play a small video presentation that I find interesting that may help to make you more aware of what cybersecurity really means.
Would you be comfortable living in a house that someone else had the key to? What if an underground tunnel led into it from a public park, where its windows could never quite close all the way? Would you trust it with your safety and your privacy? The internet is that house. This is not to say never go into the house, but rather you should know the hazards before you store all of your valuables there, and do what you can to protect them. So why is it insecure, and why can't we just fortify it until it's safe? Well, first of all, the internet was not originally built to be what it is today. It's like someone decided to expand a shoebox into a skyscraper. The internet originally developed when computers were huge and so expensive to own that only universities, big businesses, and a few governments had them. The point, originally, was to let these massive supercomputers talk to each other. And as soon as two computers could send information back and forth, we had a network. The network gradually grew until personal computers emerged in the 1980s, and then it exploded. Soon, people were not just talking to each other, but also exchanging money, playing games, reading news, shopping, and doing everything we associate with the internet today. Other devices started talking to the network too. Phones, cars, refrigerators, elevators, and power plants, and much, much more. But the ease of all those devices talking to each other came at a price. Security. One computer could send another instructions to delete everything on it, or take it over. We call these viruses and malware. Or one person could steal another's identity by guessing, cracking, or extracting a password. Vulnerabilities such as these will never completely go away because they're built into the internet's very architecture. Criminals use them to steal billions of dollars, governments use them for surveillance, and activists use them to further their political goals. Between 2004 and 2013, over 1 billion records of personal information were stolen or leaked through data breaches of major organizations. As a thought experiment, let's imagine what a perfectly secure internet might look like. Users would not be allowed to download or install anything onto their computers. All internet traffic would be monitored and regulated by bots and humans, massively limiting the number of websites you could visit. In order to log on to a website, you'd have to type in a 100-character password, submit a genetic sample, and whistle a tune. The servers that hold data would be kept in heavily armed fortresses on the moon. And even with all these safeguards in place, some clever hacker would almost certainly still find a way in. The good news is, even with our flawed internet, there are simple things you can do to protect yourself. And there are a lot of people committed to making the internet more secure.
So I mentioned that we needed to define what cybersecurity means. And basically, Merriam-Webster's definition of cybersecurity means measures taken to protect a computer or computer systems, as on the internet, against unauthorized access or attack. So as we discuss cybersecurity, keep this definition in mind. So what's the big deal? Why do I have to care about cybersecurity? Well, governments, military, corporate organizations track and collect financial, medical, and personal records about you. We're collecting unprecedented amounts of data or records. And a significant portion of that data can be sensitive. Again, could be financial related, personal information, or other types of data which basically we wouldn't want exposed to anyone else. Above and beyond that, organizations share and send that data across networks, including the internet. Because that information is shared across multiple mediums, as early as 2013, our own top national intelligence officials basically cautioned that cybersecurity attacks and digital spying basically are a top threat to national security, eclipsing even traditional terrorism. That's a pretty powerful statement. So when we talk about cybersecurity and securing systems, we're also talking about data. And one term that you'll hear coined quite frequently is the word big data. So what does big data actually mean with regards to cybersecurity? I've pulled together a couple of interesting big data statistics. On the left-hand side of your screen, you'll see some examples of big data in 2018. On the right-hand side, you'll see a comparative of 2017. And I'd like to touch on just a couple. For instance, in 2017, we have 3.6 million Google searches conducted every minute. If you look at 2018, that statistic went up to 3.8 million Google searches per minute. That's a staggering amount of data. Now you may say, I don't really care, those are just Google searches, and you're right. However, that is a form of big data. So I'll pick on a couple that you may find interesting that may be more closely tied to you and what you do every day. So for instance, Americans in 2017 used 2.8 billion gigabytes of internet data every minute of every day. That number went up to 3.1 billion gigabytes of data used every day. That's a tremendous amount of information flying around the internet. Likewise, if you look at Amazon in the top left-hand corner, they shipped 1,111 packages every minute of every day in 2018. So just think about how much data behind the scenes went into shipping that package. You had to log on to the site, you generated a search looking for a product, you clicked on the product, you added it to your cart, you checked out. On the back end, there was payment information that was sent back and forth, which either could have been tied to a PayPal account or a credit card. They also had your address for which the package was then shipped to, and you received tracking information and email follow-ups that the package had been shipped and that your order had been confirmed. That also is a tremendous amount of data, especially when you're considering that in 2017, they basically made in sales $258,000 plus every minute of every day. That's a great deal of information, transaction information that's moving about their system. So you can see there's quite a bit of big data that we're talking about here. And I'm not even touching on financial or health records necessarily that may be tied specifically to you. We're just touching on Amazon. Obviously, there could be banking information. Again, there could be patient record information if you're doing business with a doctor that has an EMR, that they're collecting and or transmitting or using that information, patient information about you. So big data is a big deal. And that's what we're talking about when we're talking about cybersecurity. So as a part of that data discussion, let's break down some interesting facts about data or big data. Over the last 2 years alone, it's estimated that 90% of the data in the world was generated. That's a staggering piece of information. More than 3.7 billion people use the internet. That's also a very staggering statistic. On average, Google now processes more than 40,000 searches every second. More than a quarter of the world's 7 billion humans are active on Facebook. 1.5 billion people are active daily on Facebook, generating 300 million photos per day. There's also 510,000 comments posted and 293,000 statuses are updated. And that's just one social media. Venmo processes 51,892 peer-to-peer transaction dollars. Uber riders take 45,788 trips per minute. So you think about the data behind Uber trips. You using the app, signing in, giving your location to Uber, selecting a location that you'd like to travel to, the driver being contacted, alerting you that they're on their way, coming to pick you up at your location, getting you to your destination, and you paying Uber for that. Again, transactional data, big data is happening behind the scenes just for something simple that we take for granted every day, like a ride on Uber. Above and beyond that, and to add one level of complexity, 33 million voice-first devices are in circulation. Actually, that number is even higher. 8 million people use a voice-controlled type device each month. So Alexa, your Google Home type products, Siri, and other voice-first devices. That's a tremendous amount of data that's collected, stored, transmitted, and reported on by large companies. So a lot of people say, because of all this data, what may be out there to protect me as a consumer, customer, or individual? Well, largely right now, GDPR is one of those type of laws that is applied across the pond in EU to protect folks' data and personal privacy. Right now, we do not have the GDPR here in the US. However, there are multiple bills that are being worked on, and there are pieces of that legislation that are being put in place in states like California. However, the GDPR is a protection regulation, and basically it is a legal framework that sets guidelines for the collection of and processing of personal information of individuals within the EU. And basically it came about or came to regulation in 2018. And we'll talk just a little bit about some of the pieces of GDPR. The term personal data to GDPR is the entryway to the application of the regulation itself. Only if processing of data concerns personal data, the general GDPR regulation applies. So when you break that down a step further, the data subjects are identifiable, then they are directly or indirectly identifiable. They're related to GDPR. And some of those identifiable pieces of data would be such as your name, an identification number, location data, online identifier, or one of several special characteristics, like physical characteristics, genetic, mental, commercial, cultural, social identity, and other. To take it a step further, in practice, basically these also include pieces of data which can be assigned to a person. So for example, your telephone number, credit card number, a license plate, account data, appearance, customer number, address. They're all considered protected by GDPR in the EU. Above and beyond that, GDPR goes further to state that a person receives this right by being born and it's extinguished by your death. So that type of data, or those pieces of data, are protected by GDPR from life until death in the EU with this regulation. Some areas that we see threats that have cropped up and or have even subsided. So in Q1 2019, we observed a 36% decrease in the quantity of reported breaches compared to the previous quarter, and we saw an 80% decrease from year to year. Basically, they go on to say that the significant decrease from year to year is attributed to the absence of third-party breaches affecting multiple education entities. However, the education sector did experience the most breaches, accounting for 50%, or a little over 50% in the first quarter. They noted that some of the areas that they saw these large breaches were basically related to phishing attempts and also misconfigured servers, which is also very interesting. So we need to talk about something called the threat triangle. The threat triangle would include such threats as phishing attempts, ransomware, denial of service attacks, Trojan horse, malvertising, malware itself, and then not to be left behind, but industrial espionage. We may be familiar with some of these areas, some of these items, and some of them you may not. We're going to discuss a couple of the big ones. So some of the major or larger of the threat triangle items would be phishing. Phishing is a type of social engineering, usually created and crafted to steal user data, such as credit card numbers, login credentials. Basically, an attacker poses as a trusted individual to trick you into giving information, private information over, or getting you to open up an email, click on a link, and fill out private information about account information you may have, such as credit cards or user IDs and passwords. Ransomware we may be a little bit more familiar with because it's been around for a while. But basically, ransomware in itself is a process in which locks or encrypts your data using a private key that you then have to pay a cyber criminal to gain access to that key, which then is used to decrypt your data or get your data back. Malware is a piece of software intentionally designed to actually cause damage to your computer. Basically, it can take the form of an executable code or a script and run at will when you open a piece of software or click on a link that you shouldn't. A Trojan is a malicious software program that misrepresents itself to appear like a Word doc or an Excel doc, but really what its goal is to install itself on your computer, and it's basically considered one of the most dangerous types of malware, designed to steal financial information, keystrokes, and other information off from your computer system. Now, there are multiple other forms of malware and or viruses that you may come in contact with, some of which I've listed on the screen, above and beyond just the ones that we talked about, that we could spend an entire day on. Some of those are whale phishing attacks, brute force and dictionary network attacks, you have man-in-the-middle attacks, you have drive-by attacks, SQL injection code, insider threats, and distributed denial of service attacks as well. Cross-scripting as well is another. Again, these are in addition to the ones that I listed on the previous slide. Spoiler alert, I mentioned that silver bullet IT solution that you may hear from other IT organizations, companies, and professionals trying to sell you. There is no magic silver bullet solution to cybersecurity. The best way is to follow a layered defense, basically a layered approach to cybersecurity. Just buying that one device is not going to fix all of your cybersecurity issues. So again, cybersecurity is a layered approach, as I mentioned. There is no one size fits all. You need to follow a sound methodology. Yes, you still need to have an updated firewall, but that's not all. You need to perform third-party vendor assessments. I mentioned the network vulnerability assessments that I perform. You need to have vendors perform these against their own systems and give you basically what are they doing to keep their systems safe that you may be using. You obviously need to keep passwords up to date. No doubt we need to follow good hygiene password practices. We need to continuously back up our data. And above and beyond just backing up the data, it's making sure that you can restore that data before an outbreak happens. So we need to test restoring data on a regular basis. We need to keep patches up to date. We need to make sure that we're running updated versions of Windows and Microsoft Office products that we use every day, including third-party products like Adobe Reader, Adobe Flash, Java, antivirus, and other applications as well. An additional way to keep safe, and although it is not the be-all end-all solution, would be to whitelist software applications. Whitelisting says, these are the applications that I'm allowing to run on my computer. If you see any other executable or any other application that tries to run or install itself, deny it from running, kill it, and then alert me. Whitelisting has been around for a long time. It, again, is not a be-all end-all solution, but it is a solution. And obviously, one of the bigger ones, that, again, that we don't do as well that we don't do a good job on, would be employee training. Keeping ourselves up to date on what these cybersecurity outbreaks, threats look like, and the ways to stay safe. This is a cybersecurity layered methodology to protection. So areas in technology regarding security that we do a good job on, that we may miss, and that we see other areas that companies and organizations are making improvements on. I've highlighted a few that I see some positive traction in green, some areas where we have some improvement, but we're seeing some positive moving on in orange, and then some areas that we just downright do a terrible job at in terms of cybersecurity. So I want to touch on just a couple of the ones in green. So mobile security and endpoint security. If ever you've fired up your iPhone, a new iPhone, it asks you to set up a PIN code or a password or facial recognition. That's some of the areas that we've seen some positive movement in. Again, manufacturers are building that into their devices. They're building that security in for us. Some areas that we see some improvement in, businesses are now spending time creating business continuity plans, basically creating or assigning an emergency director. Should some outbreak happen, basically an individual would take over and see the project of rebuilding or recovering data from end to end. We also see people understanding now finally the principle of least privilege. Don't give every user in the organization admin rights because it's easy to do. Spend some time giving them granular access to the things that they need to have access to on the network or data that they need to access, and then restricting access to everything else. Some areas that we're not doing a very good job on would be cloud security. Everyone wants to move their data to the cloud, but there's still security that needs to be dealt with, thought through, and taken into account when we move our data to the cloud. Yes, there are advantages to having our data and systems in the cloud, but we need to make sure that we're securing the front door, which would be the administrative user IDs and passwords to access that data and set those systems up. Other areas would be IoT. We buy the shiny new device that we put in our home, like Alexa or our Google Home Mini, and other things like our refrigerator that's connected to our Wi-Fi that can reorder groceries when we're low, or the dash buttons on the side of our washer and dryer that will reorder through Amazon, our Tide when we're low. Those are areas that we're not doing a great job securing. We buy those devices from China, we bring them into our network, we bring them into our home, and we're not doing a good job making sure that they're secure. And then obviously the big one, end user education. It's our job as IT professionals to make sure that people understand ways to stay safe. We need to engage in robust cybersecurity programs so that our end users know how to stay safe, how to spot those scams and phishing schemes ahead of time so that they don't put our networks and their computers at risk because they don't know what to do when they come in contact with the newest virus or Trojan or, again, phishing scheme that comes across their email. So growing threats to cybersecurity that we see quite regularly now are IoT attacks. And again, I touched on this in the last slide. Basically, IoT is becoming more ubiquitous in our lives. IoT devices also include, for instance, in vehicles, the cellular connection for internet connectivity. Basically, connected devices are handy. And so we're adding those in, but we're also not taking those attacks and that attack surface into thought when we bring those devices into our network. Connected cars and semi-autonomous vehicles. Again, I touched on this in my previous statement, that more and more we're seeing devices already added into our vehicles with cellular connectivity. Basically, 90% of any new vehicles will have the capability to connect to the internet by 2020. Basically, for hackers, this is a new attack sector, giving them the opportunity to take over a vehicle or to control our transit through attacking cellular connectivity within vehicles. We're seeing a severe shortage of cybersecurity professionals. So it's estimated that 1 million unfilled positions worldwide exist, and that number will raise to 3.5 million by 2021. Basically, that we're expanding so quickly with products like IoT devices and connected devices specifically that we don't have enough cybersecurity experts and professionals to help us keep those devices secure and our networks secure. Another area would be smart medical devices and EMRs, which would be your electronic medical records from your doctor's offices and other hospitals as well. It was noted that the FDA announced basically in the AARP magazine that in 2017 that actually there was a flaw that existed in pacemakers, smart pacemakers. There were 450,000 implanted devices that could actually be attacked. So great idea that they're smart enabled, that doctors and patients can control, connect to, gain reporting information from, but also that's an area in which cybersecurity probably should be taken a little bit more seriously, and those devices should be secured better as well. So what's your role in cybersecurity? Well, basically realize that you are an attractive target to hackers. It's not just Microsoft as a corporation or your financial institution that they're after. If they can generate revenue off from just a single person and replicate that over and over again, that's an area that they will attack. So you are an attractive target. You need to practice good password management. This would mean utilizing longer passwords or passphrases that are stronger so that your accounts can't be attacked. That is the front door to most of your access is through user passwords. Never leave your devices unattended. For instance, your phone or tablet or laptop. If you do, employ a lock screen timeout so that when you walk away or you set your device down, it times out, and if someone were to come along and pick it up, they wouldn't gain access to what that device has access to, which is generally you as an end user. Obviously, be careful clicking on attachments. Be aware of URLs in the body of messages. Most reputable companies will not send email messages with URLs asking you to click them. They will tell you to visit their site by browsing to their site, by typing the name in, and then taking care of the business that they are asking you to take care of, like updating your password or verifying your account information. Again, sensitive browsing, such as banking or shopping, should be done on a device that belongs to you. Be wary of places like Starbucks and Wendy's and McDonald's and all of the hotels that offer free Wi-Fi. While that's convenient, you really don't know where your data is going, meaning you don't know the network that you're connecting to and what devices your data is being sent through while you're using those free Wi-Fi or public Wi-Fi sources. So what can you do again in your role in cybersecurity? Back up your data regularly and make sure that your antivirus is up to date. While the antivirus is not the be-all, end-all solution, it is the first layer of defense. So you need to make sure that you have some form of antivirus on a device. There are many free ones out there that do a great job, but you need to make sure that you're backing your data up as well. Be conscious about what you plug into your computer. It's great to find that 256 gig USB data stick laying on the ground when you walk to your car. However, plugging it into your computer may infect it. So just because you find a device or you have a device laying around like a USB data stick, it's important that you pay attention to what's on it, how you use it. Be cautious about plugging it into your system. Watch what you share on social media. The goal of a cyber criminal is to enter your life as someone that you trust, and they gain information about you by searching and researching you on social media. Not only you as an individual, but the companies that you work for, your friends that you're a part of, the things that you're into, the groups that you're a part of. So it's important not to share too much or give away too much about yourself on social media. Offline, you need to also be conscious about the phone calls that you may get that are socially engineered. For instance, I received one from Northern Michigan Gas and Electric. They would like me to confirm my account, my PIN number, and any financial information. Now, interestingly enough, I am not a Northern Michigan Gas and Electric customer. So right off the get-go, I know that this phone call is a scam. It's okay to hang up. You don't have to get into an argument with this person because, believe me, they've heard every curse word in the dictionary when people figure out that it's a scam. It's best to just hang up, and it's okay to do that. Be sure to monitor your accounts for any suspicious activities. If for some reason you've clicked on a link or you've responded to a phishing attempt, it's important to monitor those accounts. And again, you're looking for small, insignificant transactions. Cyber criminals will try and tap your account for $1, $5, $10, $20 to see if they can access that finance without you even noticing before they go after the larger chunk of change. So monitor your accounts for any type of suspicious activities. Contact your bank or financial institution if you think you're seeing financial transactions that you didn't place, and or in the end, you can also freeze or put a hold on your account. I mentioned that I would give you some helpful IT resources that you can walk away from this presentation and use in your daily lives. NIST has a good framework for guideline on cybersecurity. The link at the very top is that direct link to the security framework itself that you can follow and read on, specifically if you're a corporation. Tech Perspective has a great password best practices site. They give you actually 10 best practices that you can follow on how to create and secure passwords that you may use on a daily basis. There are open source vulnerability scanning tools, albeit they are open source, so take that with a grain of salt. Most of them are difficult to configure and use, but there are open source utilities out there that you can use to scan your network and your devices on your network to see where you may be vulnerable. There's some great tips through Carnegie Mellon on cyber hygiene tips that I like, 11 essential cyber best practices. I mentioned that Mainer has a vulnerability assessment service, so there is a shameless plug on the screen to a little bit about what I do on a daily basis on how to use our service to stay safe. Any new security bulletins and vulnerability announcements that are announced multiple times a day are stored on this US government website. Lots of great bedtime reading. Hundreds and hundreds of security bulletins are posted all the time. There are thousands and thousands of pages of products that have been determined to have security related issues, or software as well, holes in Windows, holes in Microsoft Office, and other third-party programs are also posted on this site. And again, I mentioned end user cybersecurity awareness training. Most of you are aware of a company called KnowBe4. They have a lot of free resources that if you browse to their site, you can use to help you on a daily basis stay safe. You don't have to subscribe, you don't have to pay for their in-depth security training, because again, they do have multiple free resources out there. So I recommend browsing to their site and looking at some of the PDFs they have on ways to stay safe, some PDFs on ransomware, a checklist on how to stay safe and how to stay protected, as well as additional resources that you may find helpful. If you have any questions about this presentation or cybersecurity or IT topics in general, please feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is on the screen. Email address, rcarter@mainersolutions.com. You can contact me directly on my phone line at 517-886-9526, or again, I have my LinkedIn information on the screen that you can connect with me on over and see some additional cybersecurity tips and best practices that will help you stay safe. I want to thank you for joining me for Mainer Talk. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.